Alright guys, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Today we are going to be talking about symbolic interaction. So first, before we delve into the nitty-gritty, what do you guys consider to be a symbol? What do you consider to be a symbol? Yeah, give an example of a symbol, something you see in your everyday life.
Like the little apple.
Yes, good, logos.
So here I feel like I have pretty good example of not only wait time, but enthusiasm and engagement.
The presidential campaign symbols, any logo like that. What about an object? Yeah, can you think of an object that could potentially be a symbol that you see in everyday life? Maybe a flag, a cross, a religious symbol, statues on campus. Sorry, what was that? The sky could be a symbol as well. Even like the sky, a non-material thing. We can't really hold the sky in our hands, but it can still be a symbol. You know, an idea, an action, even language. Language is made up of.
What just happened was, I feel, a good example of how proper planning and teacher anticipation can not only account for questions you did not expect the students to ask, but actually plan for, because I did want the students to next up talk about non-material objects that could be symbols, and while I did not prompt the student to answer the sky, a non-material object, his answer went right along with my plan.
Gender, but these are all related, but that's not really the answer I'm looking for. Does anybody else have an idea?
I feel like what just happened was also a good example of a redirect from a student answer that was not exactly what I was looking for to discussing what we were looking for without making the student feel bad or feel like their answer was wrong.
A picture of an apple with a bite out of it. If it didn't have any, prior meaning behind it, it wouldn't mean anything to you. But you know that it represents a company, it represents a computer, a product.
One thing I have noticed by watching this and my other recordings is the fact that I do use filler words a bit too much. The pauses, like is happening right now, the lack of flow in my speech, and while I feel like usually that is not necessarily a big issue in my presentation, it is something I definitely need to look for going forward.
Here on the surface, it brings them into your mind. So it easily represents complex or large ideas, such as a company. It groups together those ideas in ways that make sense to you. You know, if you saw the apple, you automatically know it's a company, and that makes sense to you. Whereas if you saw the apple and it represented, say, a political ideology, that might not make sense to you because it doesn't. You haven't made that connection yet. Like you said, it quickly identifies information, and it helps people communicate, especially in with the example of language. So I'm going to put a symbol up on the board. Hopefully you can see it with this orange marker. Before you pass any judgments or get offended or anything like that really quickly, just kind of wait till we find out everything that this symbol has to do with. So what does that mean to you guys? This right here, not on up there. Can you guys see what it is? It is a swastika. So what does a swastika mean to you? What do most people think of when they see a swastika?
Now, while I may be touching on topics that seem a bit sensitive, I do not feel that the approach of this method or this technique in this case was inappropriate. While it can cause some feelings amongst the students that vary, depending on the student, I feel like my explanation of the use of this symbol does deter anyone from thinking that it was meant in a negative or derogatory manner.
There's another meaning behind this symbol. In Sanskrit, it is translated to mean it is good. It represents the Hindu god Lakshmi, who was the Hindu goddess of wealth, prosperity, and auspiciousness. But like we said, it was also used.
So starting at this point, I kind of noticed that I did stray a bit from the screen. I felt like while I was doing an okay job presenting myself fully to the entirety of the class, at this point, somewhat because I was using the board as a display, but throughout the entire presentation, I felt like I could have encompassed more space throughout the classroom, although we did work with only 3 students besides myself. So that does play a role in why I was only isolated to one section of the classroom.
Existed, or if at least the meanings were never attached to those symbols. So if you walk into a room, I guess this room actually doesn't have it, but say you walked into this room and you saw a flag. That flag meant absolutely nothing to you. It was just a piece of fabric hanging from a pole in the room. What do you think that would make the world like? What do you think would be different about a world where symbols did not exist? Yeah, exactly. Do you think that you'd be able to get around easily in the physical or social environment? No. Street signs wouldn't mean anything. You wouldn't know whether you were buying an Apple computer or a Microsoft or anything else, because to you it would just be a computer. So basically that kind of brings us back to the initial point that we're trying to make, and that symbolic interactions basically states that symbols, and like I said, more importantly, the meaning that we attach to those symbols, make up the social world. And without the symbols, the dissemination of knowledge would not have been possible. We would not be where we are today if we didn't have symbols to represent large bodies of knowledge and make them easy to communicate. And because these things, meanings attached to these objects are actions or pictures by individuals, the meanings that we create are socially constructed and open to interpretation, or, as we just saw with this example, misinterpretation. So basically that does leave a lot of room for error, but it also leaves a lot of room for creativity and for the human mind to be able to basically make what it wants out of what it has. So do we have any questions after we kind of covered all of that? All right. Well, thank you.